What is going on, YouTube? Thank you for tuning in to our live Q&A called Roid Sage. We are simply and very simply answering as many questions as we possibly can about what you guys want, what you guys need. Really personal questions about steroid use, anabolics, peptides, things of that nature, as well as training and diet. We try to do this every week to give you guys as much access to information as possible and to kind of get a little look into what we're doing in the background in our own coaching business. So if you are interested in sticking around, I encourage you, please drop your comments down below. We'll get to them as soon as possible. I'm going to roll the intro and we will get rocking and rolling as soon as that is done. What's going on, Adam?
What's up, man? How are things going?
How are you?
Good this morning. Woke up still heavier, then weight's still going up, but food's the same, so good days.
Maybe EQ is just your magic, man.
I think it is. Last time I used it, Equipoise, it went really well. The only thing that was an issue was that this was a long time ago. This was like, 6-7 years ago, maybe. And I just didn't know how to control my hematocrit increasing. And I was getting constant nosebleeds. And then obviously now I know therapeutic phlebotomies, basically reducing iron turnover and all these things you can reduce it. But it worked really, really well. Like I just found I was getting like vascular and I was eating like, at that time, 4,000 calories and getting leaner. I do think, you do need to monitor blood work more than other compounds just because potential renal toxicity and the hematocrit stuff, but I like it.
No, I agree. I think it's a beautiful compound, dude. It's honestly my personal go-to. It's like honestly my favorite. I won't even lie. As far as anabolics go, it's the one I've always had. And I say always, it's not like I've had a ridiculous long time to use it or anything, but it has been one of my favorites. That's for sure. It's been one that I've always visually seen the changes quite soon. And those changes were very favorable in comparison to some other compounds where you get like bloated or water retention or lots of other side effects. So I do really prefer the standard approach of test EQ and NPP or Masteron in the off season. That's like my favorite cycle. Absolutely.
I would only say, sorry, I was going to say, anything which I'd say besides the, increase in red blood cell production, and I would probably say just the super long half-life. It's probably the only thing which I'm not a super big fan of. I prefer shorter half-lives because I feel like it's easier to get a reaction / handle side effects. Because a lot of the time it's a build-up over weeks and weeks and weeks, and it's like you change your dosage at one time, then you see it at the back end, like sometimes a couple of days, well, quite a few days, if not weeks later, and that can be hard to control. It's like guys who use testosterone and decanates, so they can inject like once a month. And then have trouble dialing in the estradiol.
I mean, I think personally that like it's not that big of an issue as long as you know it, but there's people who think like front loading is going to increase the rate at which the drug is taken up, right? And like the idea of taking like, let's just say 3 grams of Equipoise the first week of your cycle is going to make sure that by the second week you have all the serum concentrations you need. And it's just like nonsensical, and I wish that was how drugs worked, but it's just simply not that simple. So as long as you understand the half-life and how that undecanate molecule works, then you can pretty much rock and roll with those gains, bro. I love Equipoise. Seriously.
Also, sorry, on a completely unrelated note, are you using the new camera?
Yes. Yeah.
It looks clear as fuck. Okay, I'm gonna have to buy one.
And this is only on 720p because Streamlabs, which is the streaming service we use, guys, that's the max quality that allows. So this goes all the way up to 4K still.
It's really clear. It's strange. It's awesome. Not strange, but it's good.
It's very cool. Okay, so do you have any questions before we dive into the ones that just have immediately come in, or do you want to just go straight to the ones?
These ones to give them their answers, but I'll actually check, see what I got.
We answered a lot on recorded content this week, so we've really blown the Q&As up with our recorded content. So if you guys aren't already, this is a good plug to follow us on social media platforms.
we're probably a bit too nice because we get asked questions all the time and I answer immediately. So then, or within a reasonable time frame, and then that usually cuts out that question. And because I don't know, I feel awkward being like, "Yeah, I'll get back to you in a week. Watch the live stream."
Right. Do you have any immediately that come to mind?
I have a couple. I did have someone asking about when to titrate insulin dosages. So if you're running like a basal lantus, how do you know when to increase it? Now, we're probably going to say the exact same thing, but yeah, I'll let you answer that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would base it off like basal insulin specifically. I would base it off the fasting glucose and then postgranular glucose. If realistically, like, you're pushing food and then you're using that basal insulin lantus, basically. If your fasting blood glucose is exceeding like 130 milligrams per deciliter after 2 hours from eating, I would consider increasing the dose. Likewise, if you're waking up with a higher fasting blood glucose than 90, I would consider increasing the dose. I would not want to see blood glucose. The whole reason we're using it is to minimize the concentrations of blood glucose, because for lack of a better explanation, it is not good to have high blood glucose. It's how we get vascular damage, endothelial damage, and I think a lot of people don't want to use insulin, but in exchange, it's like, dude, you're from the high blood glucose you're getting, you're getting fucked, bro. Like it's not smart.
So, I've literally had people reach out to me saying insulin will kill me, and I was like, wow.
That's why it's like one of the most prescribed drugs in the world, is it? I don't know.
I know. It's funny. I actually send them. There's actually these studies about. It's sad, really, but it gives interesting insight about people trying to kill themselves with insulin, and it's something like 98% fail. Don't quote me on that number, but it's an extremely high number of people who try to take their own lives with insulin, and it's that ineffective.
Yeah, it's terribly ineffective.
They fail. Yeah. But further on your point, I completely agree. Personally, I pay more attention to the fasting glucose because most of the time the athlete is using like Humalog, and postprandial, post-workout can be a bit skewed because of that. So, I mean, you can make them not use Humalog and see what it is, but I basically use it to keep your fasting glucose in range. I've done that with a few athletes right now where we had like sitting over 100, and then even in a surplus of like excess of 5,000 calories and 700 grams of carbs, we brought it back to an 83, 84 just by increasing the lantus dose and using some GDAs. So that's typically how I program it.
Yeah, I would say that's fair enough. It's usually, I mean, insulin is its own negative feedback loop. So the one thing that would be concerning for me is that with prolonged use and titration of the dose, eventually you will run into insulin resistance and have to increase the dose just due to your insulin sensitivity being so poor. But hopefully by that point you've been guided to do like some form of a mini cut or momentary drop in calories to sustain actually preventing insulin resistance, and then continue your off season as normal. But that's kind of what I would do. But that's actually a really good question, because I had a client who's recently super concerned about using insulin, and he's like, dude, it just sounds so dangerous. I'm like, what's more dangerous? Like, having 650 grams of carbs a day and your postgranular fasting blood glucose is like 140 for an hour and a half to 2 hours. That, which is like the concentration level required, like that's all that you need to hit to get like vascular damage in your eyes. And it's like, would you rather have that happen and like you develop cataracts and like shit like this after 5 years of bodybuilding, or do you want to take a little bit of insulin and protect yourself and just have that security in the background? It's like, no doubt, take the insulin, even if it's 10 years.
I usually ask them, have you used Tren before? And usually the answer is yes. And I was like, well, you've done something
like you're a fucking idiot.
Objectively way worse for your health parameters. Tacking on to that insulin question, I would actually like to add an additional one. How will you program or find out the correct Humalog dose pre-workout for an athlete?
Okay, so this one's kind of trickier because a lot of the times you just shoot from the hip, so you start lower than would ever possibly to be needed, because some clients want the results but don't want to put in the analytical work. So sometimes it's just shooting from the hip and starting at the lowest possible dose, something as simple as like literally 2 IUs for a 100 carb gram meal. Like it's not there's no way in hell that it would make someone go hypo. But if I have a really, really good client and I can ask them very specific details, what I would have them do is check their normal, every training day, check their normal postgrandular blood glucose after eating, after having sat down, after, whatever, right? I would have them also check post-training blood glucose. So like completely after they've trained without eating, just their intra-workout shake or whatever they're having. And then I would see what those are on each training day, because it likely varies each training day. And depending on which days they have the lowest response to training, meaning the blood glucose it's sustained the highest throughout the training session and it's not as depleted, those are probably the sessions that I would leverage a little bit of insulin. And then also on the ones that aren't elevated still or have come down significantly from training, let's say someone's training a leg day, what I would do still is implement insulin, but I would know that, hey, that day requires less insulin than a standard day, because naturally you consume more glycogen, therefore your blood glucose is utilized in the moment, compared to if you were to just simply, train arms or something, and your blood glucose would be much higher at the end of the workout. That's kind of how
I agree. It's in an ideal world, yes, you do have them tested a lot, but ideally, quite often that's not the case. And what I do is very similar. You should basically start low. I'll use also like a very conservative, like 20 grams of carbohydrates per 1 IU sort of model. And then that sometimes gets titrated to about 10 grams of carbs per 1 IU. And then also it's a point of finding what is, I guess, firstly, we base on their pre-workout meal. So that will just be based on what the dietary adjustments. And then basically I try to find the max amount of Humalog they can use with said pre-workout meal without going hyper and basically having fantastic gym performance. And that varies person to person. Yeah. Some people, can handle 10 grams of carbs for 1 IU. They can have 100 grams of carbs, 10 IUs of insulin, feel great, have a fantastic workout. I've known people who seem to be quite insulin sensitive in the sense that 10 IUs with 100 grams of carbs and they go hyper. Right. That's something you need to dial in. But obviously with your client, tell them, bring their glucometer, tell them to have some fast acting carbs on them, and just don't be an idiot and fuck up the measurement and do 100 IUs instead of 10.
100%. It can be a tricky thing, but I don't think it's nearly as dangerous as people would put it out to be. Like if you do 10 IUs, right, or you fuck up the dose and you do, so story time. And I told you this story, but I had a client one time where I was like, let's do 7 IUs of Humalog before the workout. And he's like, okay, cool. And a couple weeks into this, 2 weeks into this, he's texting me like, man, I've just been falling asleep nonstop after my workouts. Like I just literally go home and pass out, sometimes even before I eat. I was like, that's really weird, dude. So I'm asking him all those questions. What's your sleep like at night? What's your, supplementation that isn't already within the program? Are you taking any other medications? What's your hydration, stress at work, that kind of thing? So even like sleep studies, sleep apnea. And a couple of days later, I was like, just out of the curiosity, I was like, can you send me a picture of your insulin syringe before you pin it? And he translated 7 IUs as 70 units. So he was injecting subcutaneously 70 units of Humalog prior to his workout. And dude was fine. He just fall asleep at home, wake up 30 minutes later and go about his business. Like dude was impenetrable, but it's definitely something where you won't die if you misdose it. It's just going to feel uncomfortable for some period of time. And then your body will pretty much auto-regulate itself. So the one thing that's so true here, though, is you don't want the hypo feeling while you're training, because that fucking sucks. It's not fun when you're shaky, sweaty, and tingly. It can ruin a training session really, really easily.
Yep. To add to that story, I'm trying to find the exact amount here, but I'm pretty sure our good old friend Nick, Coach Nick Weir, decided to do fasted cardio one day. I can't remember if it was 10 or 20, but injected 10 or 20 IUs of Humalog. Just to see how long he could ride out going hypo for, and then we were messaging him, and then after about an hour said, it's fine, I just rode it out, I went hypo and was fine. Did the whole hour of cardio, went hypo, rode it out, and then went and had breakfast later.
That's insane. That's a brave man. That's a brave fucking man.
I was why you do it. It was just to see if I'm not a bitch.
Just a test of one skill.
Oh, yeah, that was good. But yeah, put it this way: you won't die. Unless you're a complete idiot.
Right. Well, yeah, you could, and the thing is there's always going to be readily accessible carbohydrates. And if a coach is good, they'll tell you to keep carbohydrates around you, just in the event that you do go hypo. You don't need to eat everything, by the way. That's a whole other misconception. I've had clients go hypo and they're like, dude, I had to stop at the gas station. I grabbed this. And it's like they grab the whole fucking buffet. And it's like, bro, you just need 10 grams of glucose to like 10 grams of glucose. I don't think people understand can elevate your blood glucose by quite a bit, because there's not 10 grams of glucose in your blood. Like if you consume that, that's a fuck ton of sugar. Even though we eat upwards of that, it's still like a lot in comparison to what's in your blood already. So 10 grams is like all you need, you know. So like eat a Haribo gummy bear, just one, and you'll be perfectly fine. I think people have this misconception where it's like, I just need to eat more continuously for the rest of like until I'm not hypo, and that's such the wrong answer. It's just like, oh man.
Well, I usually have them have an intra-workout drink, which has about 10 to 30 grams of carbohydrates, depending on what their needs are. And that just ensures that they don't go hyper, and it's just some extra intra-workout carbs.
Right.
Themselves.
Exactly. Okay, so Sam asked the question. Question is, I saw a video today where a hormone clinic owner said that bioidentical HRT had been shown in the study to not increase the risk of cancer. Only synthetic HRT can increase cancer. Why isn't there bioidentical injectable testosterone? Well, because we're injecting it. I think like for it to be truly bioidentical, it can't have an ester. It has to be administered in serum somehow. So like that's almost nearly impossible to achieve without certain enzymes and the ones we like carboxylases that break down the testosterone. And even then, what we've created is derived from like yams, I believe, like when it was first produced, and then it was further synthesized in a lab. So it is the molecule, but it is not pushed into your body the same way. So there will be abnormalities. I think that might be what he's referring to, like your circadian rhythm, your diurnal rhythm, like these things aren't playing a large role into your testosterone output, and therefore it's not quote unquote natural. Like someone taking, like I made a video just that will be on this channel probably in 2 weeks from now, but it was talking about like fake natties. And if they even take 100 milligrams of testosterone, that is a massive enhancement because they don't have that diurnal fluctuation that a natural person would have. And so that's kind of the difference. Like, whereas bioidentical administration of testosterone would be more diurnal, you'd have peaks and troughs, and you'd have very unstable levels. That might be what he was referring to. There's actually no conclusive research to suggest that any form of androgen increases risks of cancer. In fact, they were created to prevent cancer in the first place. And this was actually a great study done on women, because it was assumed that women would have greater risks of cancer if they had taken some form of HRT. But there was a great study done with a huge population. Is the Women's Health Initiative was the study. And initially they interpreted the data as that, yes, HRT will increase risks of breast cancer and cervical cancer. And what they shortly found was, after thousands of subjects were tested, that is actually not the case. In fact, the quality of life far outweighs the risk of increase in cancer, which was marginal at best. It was non-statistically significant. So, I think the doctor's probably off his fucking quack, dude, personally.
And I mean, to further add to that, like, testosterone is a synthetic, exogenous testosterone is a synthetic bioidentical hormone. Like, yes, we've synthesized it, but we've made the molecule pretty much almost exactly, or not almost exactly as if it occurs in our body, but it's a synthetic form, which, as Kolton touched on, is not going to mimic your normal testosterone production. So, as far as, look, we're not medical doctors here, but we're going to say, as far as we know, we've never seen any research that indicates, especially testosterone increases cancer marker or cancer risk.
I mean, anything that increases cell proliferation will increase cancer risks. So
growth hormone,
growth hormone. Like, the thing is I think people don't realize, like, if you stood out in the sun for 5 minutes, your risk of cancer is significantly higher than if you injected 10 IUs of growth hormone, realistically. So the broad spectrum of things that can give you cancer, this is probably on the lowest tier of that list, statistically significant in terms of that, because what we do know is that if you're out in the sun, you will get melanoma for sure. And there's not like it's not like a 5% chance. It's like a fucking 45% chance, especially if you have like very pale complexion like me.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's many ways to get cancer. And I think one way is maybe, yeah, increasing cell proliferation through androgen use or growth hormone use, but marginally at best. Like it wouldn't be notable compared to if you are living a healthy lifestyle or if not. For example, smoking, right? Like that's going to increase your cancer risks wildly more than any kind of synthetic compound would. So yeah. Lee J, I love his picture. It's like a jacked Donald Trump. I've been taking 50 milligrams of Winstrol for 11 days in, and I noticed my stomach is now in discomfort, which is normal for orals. However, during my, yeah, we just talked about this, and it's funny you bring this up, Lee. We were just recorded a whole video on this.
Sorry,
Lee. I am getting shortness of breath. Any ideas? So the hard answer, and Adam probably knows this one, is just stop taking it. Yeah, like that's the hard answer. That he keeps on going. Should I cut the dose in half or take it out of my cycle for this round of cutting? What are your thoughts, Adam?
Oh, fuck, you know my thoughts. Okay, let's break this down, Lee. Firstly, why are we taking orals to cut? Anabolic steroids do not affect your ability to burn fat. Yes, there's some interaction with the glucocorticoid receptor with trenbolone. That's a whole different thing. Helps, inhibits muscle protein breakdown, but itself doesn't cause, it does increase T3 production or T3 conversion. But most anabolic steroids do not directly increase lipolysis or fat loss, especially not Winstrol. Okay, so firstly, you're not aiding your cutting cycle by adding this oral compound. Secondly, we know when we have oral administrations or basically ingest any sort of anabolic steroid orally, that it's going to pass the digestive system and usually cause some gastric distress. Myself, I take 10 milligrams of Anabol and I can't eat. My appetite is screwed. Now, there is a way to sort of subvert that. I think we filmed and we'll release a video on it, but it's basically sublingual administrations where you basically have it and dissolve it under the tongue. The mucous membranes and the capillaries in your mouth, okay, will absorb the compound and you won't have it going through a gastric, basically digestive tract, which will cause issues. That's but you'd also run much lower doses. Also, 15 milligrams of Winstrol is wild to be like, I don't know if you titrate it up or this is your starting dose, but that's a lot. I would personally say that it's the discomfort caused and the gastric issues are no way worth the additional anabolism. You could literally just increase your injectables and have a greater effect and less deleterious effect to your health markers. And also, it's not going to affect your cutting, so to speak, a performance or ability to lose body fat. So what I would say is increase injectables if you need to. And also bear in mind, in a deficit phase, unless you are like a 280-pound mass monster, you don't need a lot of anabolics to retain tissue. In fact, most don't need much. Like I could probably maintain most of my tissue in a mild deficit on like basically TRT or a little bit above TRT. Now, if you try and get stage lean shredded, yeah, you would have to use a bit more to retain a bit more tissue. But yeah, long story short, I would cut out the Winstrol, increase injectables if you need a little bit more anabolic load if you're getting quite lean, or go for a little bit sublingual, maybe deep into the deficit, you need some additional neurological drive or workout performance. And yeah, I'm pretty sure Kolton will tell you the exact same thing.
Yeah. I mean, like hands down, it's just take it out, introduce 350 milligrams of some other androgen that is injectable. I think that's just the best way to go. Especially, I don't know your situation, right? He says he's cutting. I don't know if there's a photo shoot or a show that is in place, but Winstrol is definitely something I would use in that scenario, but not until like the last 2-3 weeks of a prep, right? And at that point, you're eating so little that the discomfort and distress and your inability to digest food is like so minuscule. It's kind of like whatever, because there's not that much food volume going down at whatsoever. So I would say that it's fine if you were really close to a show or really close to a very exact photo shoot that you're trying to do. Alternatively, if you're just looking to cut and look really good, replace it with an injectable 350 milligrams so you can equate the androgen dose. You're going to be fine, 100%. If not, make better progress, truly. What's up, boo? Okay. Ascension Martinez, I think you meant training. Best training split for enhanced lifter, TRT plus level enhanced. Nothing crazy. So I think every training split works. realistically. It's just a true equation of frequency, volume, and load. And so if you can balance those three things for your specific biology, you are going to get indefinite results for as long as you can foreseeably see. It's just doing that over the long haul. So personally, because you are enhanced, you can handle a bit more recovery. So if anything, I would suggest doing higher frequency and higher volume. That's perfect. That's like the money that I think enhanced lifters get to dip into and steal a little bit from. But what are your thoughts, Adam?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I'm basically going to say what you said in a slightly different manner. Kolton's 100% right, where anabolics are just increasing your recovery capacity. More anabolics, more ability to recover from. If we have enhanced recovery capacity, that means we can do more work. More work can be in the form of more volume, more training closer to proximity to failure, more load, more repetitions, basically more raw stimulus magnitude, stimulus here from the workout. But the best split for you, unfortunately, is going to be a split that you've thought about and programmed specifically for your strengths and weaknesses. So if you have great legs, but a shit upper body, if I give you, I don't know, a split which is like 2 lower body days or 3 lower body days and one or 2 upper body days, let's say, for example, that's not going to be good for you. You need to, grow your upper body. So you need to look at your physique, see what your strengths and weaknesses are, then program a split which prioritizes your weaknesses and maybe trains your stronger body parts at something called like minimum effective volume or around that. And then basically try to do the highest, I guess, stimulus you can get from, which could be increasing the frequency you hit that muscle, increasing the volume number of working sets you hit that muscle, the proximity of failure where you train that muscle, and basically progress from there. So without knowing further information, it's literally impossible for Kolton now to tell you your best training split. You'd have to tell us your injuries, give us suppose your physique, what you're trying to grow, what your goals are, even what lifts work well for you. And that way you make the best split. And without shameless plug at the moment, that's why we always say the best program is probably one that a coach like us or you have designed for yourself. There's nothing off the shelf which is going to be the best for you, period.
Yeah, and I think to caveat that too, just to piggyback off of it, the reason that coaching is so worthwhile, and me and Adam were talking about this because we coach each other, and it's so worthwhile is because you have accountability, and sometimes you can get so stuck in a way of doing things that, let's say I create a program, right? And I'm the kind of guy that can eat the same thing for 3 years without even batting an eye, or I can do the same training program for 3 years without even considering that I'm bored. So I can be doing the same training program and Adam might be like, hey man, are you not progressing volume? Or maybe we could add more frequency here or whatever the case might be. And that's what truly makes a training program unique and adaptable to the person's current environment and why it's so worth it for a coach, not even plugging our services, but just having someone to look at your program and be like, I think you actually need to be working on this, bro, because your arms are shit. You know what I mean? And it's going to constantly adapt. You might, for example, I started out with a really weak back. I started to train my back in high frequency and high volume. It grew really big. Now Adam's like, dude, your back is huge. Let's focus on chest and arms. I thought my fucking arms are good, but really they're not. I know that. But, just kind of adaptability is what we're looking for. So it's not a clear and cut answer all the time. I would just say as much frequency and volume as you can tolerate and recover from. And that's the only answer you need to worry about. So,
yeah.
What are your guys' favorite bodybuilding podcasts?
To be honest, the only one I watch is the Anabolic bodybuilding podcast. That's the only one.
Body, I probably am fucking
What's
his
the
name
other?
up.
There's another one which is good. It's with fuck. Is it Big something? Oh fuck, I just forgot it.
There's fitness. I think it's Fit Nation. It's with Body, and sometimes they have Nick Walker on there and a couple other guys. They're pros, but I don't know who they are exactly. Stu is on there. That's actually a pretty good one because they have no filter, so they'll just straight up talk about real shit. However, it's getting pretty popular, and I think they're going to start filtering a lot of the shit they say. So get on it while it's good. But that's a really good one. I recommend. I think it's Fit Nation podcast, and they literally talk about everything from all the gear they use, what cycles they run, how much cardio they do, everything as an actual IFBB pro trying to get to the Olympia. It's Body Farrell. I'm probably fucking his name up. And if you're watching this, dude, I'm so sorry, but Body Farrell, is his name. They call it the Fit Nation podcast. It's very good. Highly recommend it.
Yeah. I was gonna say Think Big Bodybuilding Media.
Yeah,
they do a podcast, which is good.
That one's okay. It used to be a lot better, in my opinion, and then they kind of transitioned into trying to do reaction content and staying away from YouTube's TOS, which I get it, but it kind of makes it more of like a flaccid penis to watch as opposed to, you know, an erect one. And that's why we say, so that YouTube can't fuck us, all the information we provide in this video is what we've seen in the industry, and we're reporting it back to you. We are not recommending it. Doctors have not told us this. We are not doctors or have any medical advice to give you. This is just what we've seen other people do in the industry. Therefore,
these are just fake stories I come up with, guys. It's bullshit.
Right? They're all fake, dude.
I'm natural.
I'm fucking so natural, bro. It's crazy. Shay asks, yo, brother, I'm deep into the off season right now, probably sitting around 20% body fat, but my pumps are good. Gym performance has been crazy with very little weight gain. Would you suggest going into a cut or keep pushing since everything seems to be going into a positive direction? Very, very good question. I love this question, actually. So for me personally, if your weight's not going up, your strength is awesome, your performance is awesome, I would probably keep going, but increase androgens. It sounds like that's probably the ratio of things you need. And then hopefully after doing so, you can kind of see a titration in weight again. And that's all you really need to be worried about. In doing that, if you're to keep the calories the same and body fat isn't to elevate, which is really important, right? If you kept calories the same and you increase the dose of androgen, say a titration of 100 to 200 milligrams, hopefully what you'd see is a slow but sure leaning out of the physique as you do increase weight. Or maybe even maintaining weight after a couple of weeks, but getting leaner significantly. And those are kind of the two things we're looking for: is strength is linearly progressing and weight is linearly progressing. If you're eating lots of food, your gym performance is good, you aren't gaining just straight fat tissue, increase the androgens if you're not going up in weight. If your androgens are high, you're not going up in weight, but your performance is good, except you're like 10% body fat, increase the fucking food. It's not an androgen equation at that point. So
yeah, couple caveats here though. He said he's 20%. I'm assuming 20% body fat, but then I would say, are you sure you're 20%?
So, yeah.
Yeah, my first thing would be like, check your fasting glucose, because I personally think 20% is way too high for an enhanced lifter, because I know if I go like above 16, if I were to give a number, 16%, my health mark, like as soon as I start losing visible abdominals, like not full six pack, but like as soon as I have like zero outline of abs, usually that's a good anecdotal evidence for me, or for my anecdotal experience, that like my insulin sensitivity will be shit, my fasting glucose will be shit, my blood pressure will be up, I'll basically get too fat. So when you say everything's going good, it's fine if it's going good from like a training perspective, but like, what's your fasting glucose at? What is your blood pressure at? What's your resting heart rate at? When last did you do blood work? If all that is in check, I agree with what Kolton's saying, but we have to define like what everything going good means, because typically if I had an enhanced lifter and he's legitimately 20% body fat, time to mini cut, because I don't believe your health markers can be good at that level of body fat.
Yeah. And yeah, what I said was really predicated on the fact of like, you can get a little bit leaner with using a little bit more gear, and instead of like having to full stop your off season push. That's typically my preferred method if we do see something like that. But I 100% agree with Adam that 20% is not good or healthy or functional in any capacity. I don't think a bodybuilder should truly get outside of 12% at the upper echelon if they're doing something right. And, you know, usually people are going to be like, there's no fucking way. People are saying 12%. Also caveating that there are going to be differences in water retention and fluid distribution in different bodybuilders. But most of the time, if you took androgens out of a bodybuilder in the off season, you took all the growth hormone out and you had them do no carb for a day, they would look shredded still. So I believe that's my core. So I do think your body fat is a little bit too high. I would like to see it somewhere around more closely tied into like 12%, but I think you could also trim off a few percentages just by increasing androgens appropriately. Nick P, can anabolics potentially cause issues for offspring? I've never seen this discussed as the ramifications aside from lowering sperm count. So there's I'm really into reading research, guys. It's like one of the things I love doing. So I have notifications every day when new research comes out about very specific keywords like testosterone or angiotensin or like different kind of things I'm interested in. And I did read a study, and it was a pretty good one. And I think actually Steve brought it up as well. He probably saw it around the same time I did, that higher doses of androgens can, I'm forgetting the term for it, but it's when a sperm has two tails. So basically having what they've seen as a correlation, it's not necessarily for sure if it's causation, but this is just one study. It was a pretty good study, but just one. It was in Nature, the journal Nature. And it had two tails. It was bisected. And so when a sperm has two tails, it spins in circles and it doesn't go where it needs to go, obviously, to the egg. So what was theorized, and I believe Steve said this before I did, is that the reason that male bodybuilders tend to have more female offspring is because the androgens affect the chromosomal sperm that would be standardized as male. I'm not even like, spermatogenesis is a very complicated topic, so I'm not 100% certain on that. But from what I understand, scratching on the surface, that's the gist of what we know at the moment.
Yeah, my understanding was basically the male chromosome or whatever in the sperm cell, which dictates whether it's going to be a male or female, is more easily damaged, more fragile. So when we're using anabolics, which can affect our sperm quality, my understanding is that that degradation means typically the sperm which result in female offspring are stronger and more resistant. So usually the male sperm, so to speak, or what's going to result in a male, I am butchering this, are less likely to actually result in fertilization of embryo, which leads to theory. That's why you see bodybuilders mainly having daughters, because the male sperm has been damaged, and it's less likely to result in a boy. So basically, I mean, Steve has spoken about this himself and resaw videos. Go check those out. But he basically did a whole very extensive comprehensive fertility protocol for him and his wife, so he can increase his sperm quality as well as ensure that there's no damage. So I don't think he outright said it, but I'm sure Steve wants to support it. Just to ensure that he has the best chances of having an unaffected kid by anabolics. But yes, there is potential effect there.
Yeah, I just found the study, and I'm not going to go through it because it's a very lengthy one, but there is definitely sperm dysfunction, and that's something it very clearly says. And this is due to increased oxidative stress in seminal plasma and sperm homogenate of the it gets really complicated and technical. Basically, it creates more active oxygen species in the testes, in and of itself. And like Adam said, create less favorable male sperm, probably. Joe R. Sorry, I'm not going to call you by your real name. What is skip loading? What are your opinions on its application and efficacy? So you go ahead with this one. I have a couple opinions.
So my understanding of skip loading is by skip hill, and it's also I think sometimes referred to as shit loading. And my understanding of it, which is very basic, is just it's loading with junk food. Is my understanding. I think it's like eat clean for like 6 days or something, and then on the 7th day you load with junk food. I apologize if this is not exactly what it is, but it's basically just loading with high sodium, high fatty, high carbohydrate food. It's my understanding.
No, that's exactly right. It's Skip Hill curated this idea, and basically he gives you like exactly 8 hours. Like it's actually kind of smart because he gauges the amount of loading period that people can do based on hours per day. So he'll say like you have 2 hours to skip load, you have 6 hours to skip load, you have 12 hours to skip load, and then based on how much food a person can ingest during those several hours is how much they'll load, right? Which is just wildly variable and induces tons of eating disorders. I'm certain of it. But yeah, you're right. It's basically just eating whatever you want for the next X amount of hours, or at least strategically aiming for low fat, high carb foods that aren't normal in meal plans. For instance, French fries, or for instance, pancakes, waffles, muffins, things of that nature. I don't think it really has much of an efficacy because you'd simply ask the question, why not just eat real food? What is the substantial evidence to support that the highly processed foods are going to be any more substantial for you than would rice and chicken or whatever, right? And I don't think there is anything to be supportive of that. It's just you're getting more intramuscular triglycerides, you're getting more glycogen, more sodium, therefore the next day you feel great. Same thing as what a normal refeed would do you, except it's wildly more calculated and wildly more repeatable. And that matters a ton when you're going on a peak and you're trying to actually show up the best that you possibly can.
Yes, slight side tangent. So I actually, unbeknownst to myself, when I was like maybe 20, 21, did a modified version, I would say, of skip loading, where I basically, had a bunch of bros in the gym back in the day, and information was a lot more scarce when it came to bodybuilding back then. But basically, we were discussing like refeed tactics, and a lot of the guys back then would just same thing, give like an eating window where it wasn't eat shit, but it was like eat as much low-fat, high-carb food you could, like even sugary cereals and just candy and shit like that. And I did do it, and initially it did work, but then I realized years of force feeding and being able to just eat crazy amounts of food was kind of backfired on me, because what most people can eat in 2-3 hours, I was maybe doubling that and getting so goddamn bloated. And also I was like almost progressively overloading, where each refeed I was able to eat more and more and more, until the point it was just like so inaccurate. I was getting so bloated from basically trying to, because I was like pretty goddamn shredded. And I was like doing like a mock contest prep, and I was literally just stuffing my face more and more each time, to the point I was getting more and more distended. And I was like, I don't think the time limit is a good thing, because also psychologically I was like, hey, I got fucking 2 hours to eat some fucking food, and basically set out like a buffet for myself and then try to consume it all. So I'm all for less about like hour windows, because that can run away with you, and more so about, as Kolton said, specific number values and specific foods, and arguably more macronutrient whole healthy foods, because it's like, I don't know, we put our health markers on the line, we'll risk ourselves with anabolics. Like, I think fucking up with food is just not a good idea.
Yeah, I agree. That's a big part of it, is like nothing will elevate your blood pressure more than a really shitty binge session, and it's just, or your heart rate. And I don't think those things are good to just constantly repeat yourself to. And it's funny you say that. It's like progressive overloading. And I used to not be able to eat much. I used to eat like 2 times a day and be good. Now I'm ravenous if I don't eat a large meal at some point, like a really large meal at some point throughout the day. And like when we went to the buffet with Steve, it's a really great example. The girls like ate like 1, 2, 3 plates at most. Like me and Steve ate like 12 plates of food, of like steak, and like filled to the brim. So like for me, I don't think that's a great idea, because when you let people to their own devices, they can often go off in wild and dysfunctional tangents of binging, and I just don't think that's healthy. I don't think it's even behaviorally a healthy thing to reinforce, because that person now is going to be dependent on these certain refeeds every week, and that's their perception of normal, and that's not normal. So same homie, is it true that testosterone is synthesized from yes, it is true, from yam root? If so, what would that mean? Chest injections are vegan friendly? Yes because they use vegetable oil, and they're made from actual roots. So
healthy.
It's healthy. That's why if a vegan takes androgens and he's super jacked, it's completely fine and he's natural. And it's all because of veganism that got him there, not actually anything else. Nick P, I've heard people say HGH increases cancer cells. Is that accurate? If so, any methods to check or etc.? You want to go for it?
Yeah, so basically, HGH, as you know, is going to increase IGF-1, which is going to systemically increase cell turnover and cellular repair. Unfortunately, that includes pre-existing growth, cancers, and tumors. So it's not going to directly cause you to get cancer, but if you have any existing, something that's pre-existing, it will exacerbate that growth and basically accelerate it. So that means that if you are someone who has had a history of cancer, well, I don't know, personally, I wouldn't use growth hormone. If you've literally had cancer before, I think that's just way too risky. But if you are someone who's actually concerned, you can do things like a full body MRI, where they or cancer marker screening, which basically usually involves a similar thing where they basically go over your body and see if any growths, tumors, or potential cancers. You can get blood work, but my understanding of speaking to a bunch of medical professionals was that you can get a lot of false positives with these blood work markers when it comes to cancer screening, and that can be quite hard. So usually the MRI is the best basis to go for. I mean, shit, I'm actually due for one myself. I would advise that if you are using exogenous growth hormone, certain peptides like secretagogues, which have a similar effect, you do get cancer marker screening at least once a year, and basically just check your skin as well. So yes, I would say that's probably the main drawback that I find with growth hormone or and related compounds is that it can affect that. But yeah, you are correct in that.
Yeah, I think that the big caveat is, you said, if you have pre-existing cancers, if you have malignant cancers or just no cancer at all, you're generally going to be fine. Like growth hormone will not make a cancer cell. It'll just cause normal healthy cells to reproduce. And that process is not in and of itself cancer inducing. It is the genomically fractured or impaired cells that, when reproduced, which would be already deemed as cancerous cells, that when reproduced are bad. You don't want that to happen. And growth hormone can certainly lead into that just due to its ability to enhance cell proliferation. And so in theory, the question's kind of correct. Increase cancer cells, assuming that the cancer cells are already there. Yes, it can. That is accurate. If you don't have cancer cells, it cannot create them out of thin air. So I hope that kind of makes a little bit more sense.
Yes.
Lee J says, again, thank you guys so much for your response, guys. It was mostly for strength numbers. I'll just dump it. Much respect. Great new camera, Kolton. Looking me in the face. Thank you. I'm actually eating a lot more. Starting to take gear now that Adam's got mad at me. So I appreciate it. Yeah, I think realistically, if you were looking for strength in numbers, I would say, yeah, like Turinabol, Anavar, or Anadrol infrequently. Like if you take Anadrol at like half the dose normal people do, like 50 milligrams, dump it down to 25 milligrams, and you take it 3 times a week as opposed to every day, you should be generally fine.
Injectable Anadrol.
Injectable Anadrol is something that Roman Fritz absolutely loves and tells me every single day to get back on. I've never been on it, so just get on in general.
I used, which was wild. It gave me the biggest strength increase I've ever used over Anadrol, everything else. I got methylated tren once, methyl tren.
Yes.
When I was in South Africa, I was lean as hell, calorie deficit, like very, very lean. And I took it only for 2 weeks because I'm pretty sure I was like dying after the 2 weeks because I got blood work and it was horrible. But literally workout to workout, my lifts were going up. And I was like, holy shit, this is wild. But yeah, I remember getting blood work. Kidney markers were shit. Liver markers were shit. Lipids were shit. I felt horrible. And also my joints, I think, were getting sore because I legitimately thought that like my strength increases were literally, outgoing my joint recovery capacity. So yeah, if you want big strength numbers, try that. But I don't think it's sustainable at all.
Yeah, I tried methyl tren too. That was like my second prep, and I was like 1 week out from my show, and I'm like, I gotta fucking throw something at this. I want to get huge, And then that time, my perception was like, well, if you just take something, you'll get huge quite immediately. And that was absolutely not the case. And in fact, it was probably the wildest experience because, similar to you, like I would get wildly strong and like super aggressive in the gym, but I almost felt like I shrunk because it was like I was almost over depleting my muscles in that period of time when I was already depleted. And I was like, what the fuck's going on? So it's so funny you said that. JT, hip thrusts versus squat. What's better for bikini competitors to grow glutes specifically whilst limiting growth in hamstrings and quads? Really good question.
Okay. Yeah, this is a good one because when I first read the half of it, I was going to say squats because I think hip thrusts are overrated as fuck. I think we have a lot of evidence which supports muscles in a lengthened or stretched position are going to be better for hypertrophy. A hip thrust is, has most tension at the end of the concentric where you're pushing up, which doesn't have a lot of stretch effect on the glute. I actually don't like throwing hip thrusts for female athletes, okay? And yeah, they have their time and place, but I don't think they're generally good exercise. I think with things with length in the glute, things like lunges, things like squat patterns, maybe a sumo stance, even hip hinge movements like RDLs are better. But then you put limiting growth in hamstrings and quads. So firstly, I'd say I've never seen a bikini competitor with massive quads and hamstrings and minimal glutes. So I would usually say you can have hamstrings. But if you were trying to limit hamstring and quad growth, then I would say yes, because unfortunately those exercises which are squat patterns, which involve knee flexion, are going to involve some quads. What I would say is if you just 100% can't grow your hamstrings and quads, like, well, I don't know, you'll get into wellness or something, I don't know, then sure, you may use hip thrust, but it's going to be quite ineffective. What I would say is maybe go for a sumo squat pattern and really drive through the glutes, okay, and then just completely limit your hamstring quad volume. Like have no direct quad work, no direct hamstring work, and that indirect work that you gain from these squat patterns will be enough to maintain it. And then if you're natural, I don't think you will grow. If you're on female athlete on a bit of androgens or just PDs in general, growth hormones and things like that, yeah, you might see some growth, but nothing compared to the glute growth. That's my opinion on that.
Yeah, I think I would agree with you. If I could extend the list, I would, because honestly, the thing with hip thrusts is like women perform them wrong, and this is men perform them wrong. It's not just women.
What about kickbacks?
Yeah, I would kickbacks 9 times out of 10, unless it's like a very specific situation. The thing with hip thrusts is like women always anteriorly tilt their hips when they're doing hip thrusts. And so like the glute engagement is completely nullified almost immediately. Then when they're talking about ranges of motion and where to put their foot pressure, it's always wildly wrong. And you almost certainly, if a female is doing a hip thrust, it's wrong. Like almost certainly, unless you can go there physically, show her this is how you move your hips. This is how you posteriorly tilt your hips and actually make sure that your glutes are engaging and not other muscles like your quads. Then it can make sense to her. This is where you put your foot placement. This is where the pressure of the weight should go on your foot as you're moving through the different ranges of motion. It's a very complicated movement in all honesty. So for most females, I'll program it only if I know they're really advanced and I can walk them through very strategically how to do them. So in most cases, I would prefer kickbacks, glute medial kickbacks, glute max kickbacks. I love kickbacks. I think they're wildly more effective. The other thing that I think is effective too, if you want me to get into hyperspecificity, is reverse hyperspecificity, reverse hyperextensions. I think those are great, especially if you do them on the Smith machine. You can have a girl lay on a bench and then kick up with her legs, directly flexing her glutes. It almost ensures that she's posteriorly tilting her hips, and there's almost no creation of margin of error within that movement. I think that's one of the biggest bangs for your buck as a female trying to get bigger glutes. I would stay away from things like squat patterns if you don't want bigger legs. If you want bigger glutes, I would stick with kickbacks, reversed hyperextensions, or even, that was exactly what I was doing in that video. That was exactly the movement I was doing in that video. There's a lot of ways you can create glute contraction and extension without having to train the rest of your legs. It's just being cognizant of what that might look like. And there's other things too that I would recommend, like basically split squats, but with the rear leg elevated so that the motion of the split squat is almost arcing like this. So when you come down and you're still trying to posteriorly tilt, the hip extends so much, stretching out that glute, getting the stretch mediated hypertrophy. That's kind of what I would aim for. So
yeah, I mean, sorry, continue.
No, you go.
I was just gonna say, like, realistically, like, don't get me wrong, you have a competitor or individual that you're trying to assist, which or yourself, I don't know, that you're trying to grow your glutes and not your quads and hamstrings. I would say, like, very few people are such hyper responders that they have any sort of indirect quad and hamstring work that they grow. What I personally would do, and funny enough, I've done this for, like, my partner who's like going between bikini and wellness, and a lot of females that I coach who are competitors themselves. I don't know, I feel like I'm becoming a bikini coach now, hence the men's bikini joke. But aside from that, doing just direct glute work, like from Kolton mentioned with those exercises, and just having the reps be indirect in the sense that, like, you're doing a sumo squat, yeah, you're going to get a little bit of quad stimulus there, but I don't personally think enough that you're going to get like massive increases in your quads and hamstrings that you can't program it. I feel I'm hypertrophy. I've only ever trained males before, so it's new to me. Wants to do bikini. Yeah, honestly, dude, I would just program all glute-biased exercises, which all that indirect volume will be enough to maintain the hamstring and quad growth. Because again, especially if it's a natural female, you're not going to do a set of squats and get like Ronnie Coleman quads. It's like, it's not going to happen. So I would say just, yeah, bias the direct glute work, and then the indirect will cover, all the stimulus needed.
Yeah, and this was the glute for those of you who are tuning in and don't know what he was referring to. This is what I was talking about, because it almost immediately puts a female into posterior hip flexion, and I just think it's, and honestly, this one was a little bit weird because the bench was wider than I would have preferred. If it was more narrow, it would have been more ideal, and then I would have also put her back a little bit more. But this one is like gold, and if you do this for a female and you kind of get her hips right and you can make sure she's putting her foot in the right place, which is also kind of hard. You see, I like in the video, I'm cueing her to basically shift her foot depending on where she is. So as she comes down, to make sure she's pushing this way, almost like laterally, and then when she's coming up, to shift the push towards vertical. So it is a bit of a tricky movement, but if you can get it done, it's like, it is really effective in terms of directly stimulating glute contraction, which one of the difficult parts about glute training is getting an extension. But besides the point,
I'm just reading the chat. Yeah, super afraid of growing quads. Sorry, dude, I've met many female competitors who come to me like that. You're like, oh, I don't want huge quads. And yeah, again, unless you're people try get huge quads. We try get huge quads. If it's not going to happen. I've never seen someone, not try get huge quads by not programming quads. Only train them indirectly and getting huge quads. It's just not going to happen. Program her sumo squat patterns. Program her that reverse hyper. Program her hip hinge movements. Okay, make them glute biased, and she will grow her glutes, and then minimize the quad revolve. Because if you try to do all these exercises which are hyper specific to the glutes, which maybe aren't the best for hypertrophy but are good at isolating the glutes, you're probably going to get some suboptimal growth, especially if she's natural. It's going to take years, as you want to know. It takes years to build muscle. So someone is not going to go from like an intermediate or beginner to suddenly having huge quads after like training them for 6 months. It's going to take literal years of blood, sweat, and tears. So yeah, I would just reassure her that it will be fine.
Yeah, and also you could just give her a try and fix the problem.
That's it. Like, yeah, I understand where you're coming from. I've had females be like, I don't want to train arms. My arms are gonna get huge. I'm like, right. I've been trying for years.
Yeah. It's still going, taking literally 20 times the amount of androgens that you're doing and still not there. So let me know if you found the secret. JT, as an aside, how often would you get them to train glutes? I know the meme of competitors, every workout, but what's more realistic? Honestly, like, I think me and Adam both do the same thing, like 3 to 4 times a week, depending on how their recoverability is. It's like a very high frequency split.
The answer is almost always how much they can recover from. And even though it's a meme, it actually is not that unrealistic. Yeah. So there is some data saying that females can actually recover from higher volumes. Now, this was on natural athletes. Obviously, recovery capacity will change when we introduce PEDs. But genuinely, from my experience and from the data, it supports that females seem to actually recover better from higher volumes. They also have different pain thresholds to males. So personally, the way I program it is I don't have a set number in mind. I don't think, only 3 times a week, only 4 times a week. Most of the time, it does actually end up that way on average. But what I do is increase the frequency of the glute training and basically find what they recover from. And what I found was the maximum that athletes that I've coached can recover from. It's a split which goes lower, upper, lower, rest, lower, upper, lower. And on each of those lower days, they're training glutes. So that results in about 4 times per week, as Kolton said. I haven't seen someone recover from more than that, but that's basically what I've used. So basically like a reverse push-pull legs, except it's basically legs 4 times a week.
Yeah, and this is why like certain enhancements can be so powerful for female competitors, even if they are like wellness, which you might think wouldn't need much of enhancement to get the look. But if you want to grow, like they need a lot. If you want to grow glutes specifically, and you are trying to train the highest volume possible, it's almost impossible to do the recovery needed without some form of enhancement. It doesn't have to be androgens, right? But like some form of enhancement. So
yeah. And before we go down that path too, with these bikini athletes, guys, start with the non-viralizing PEDs first.
Yes.
Don't be like,
Well,
I'm a
Anabolics
female, here's Anabol. Like, fuck off with this shit. I'm just going to start saying this all the time. Like, start with the growth hormone, as long as we've discussed the cancer marker stuff. Consider the insulin, DHA, pregnenolone. Okay. Then maybe consider 2.5 milligrams of Anabol. None of this fucking 10 milligrams a day shit. Like, fuck.
Right.
Most times I speak to a dude or something, he's like, yeah, bro, got the girlfriend on. She's going to do a bikini show, 10 milligrams Anabol daily. I was like, you do know that will lead to viralization. Like, that can, at that dosage, lead to that. And also, like, why have you not exhausted the other pathway? It's just like being natural, never trained before in the gym, ever, and like hopping on like tren or testosterone or
terrible,
being like, oh, I'm just going to go max dose right now. Like, exhaust the pathways, get that low hanging fruit first, and then consider it. Sorry, that's my TED talk for today.
No, it's so true. It's funny because like immediately the action is put a girl on Anavar, and it's like 10 milligrams a day, and that's 70 milligrams a week, which is for an average female 8 to 15 times the amount of androgens that she would normally have in her body, like 700 to like 1,500% of the total amount of androgens that she would have in her body at any given point naturally. And you expect that to be completely fine. And we know a fair share of people who put their girlfriends on that. And it's just, it blows my mind because there's so many things you can do that would get wild fucking results, wild results without ever having to virilize a female, like ever having to. It's just, it's insane. So,
and also you have to ask one important thing I always ask enhanced females is, are you willing to accept any levels of viralization? And lo and behold, often the answer is no. So if the answer is no, and they don't want that, then you have to firstly warn them about the risks and what they may lead to, and also say, well, you should, as their coach or person that's assisting them, should explore the options which don't lead to viralization, which they can utilize first, and then decide if they want to go down that rabbit hole. Because that's the thing. Like, some females are okay with some vocal changes and some of the other side effects, but many aren't, because they want kids, they want to laugh after bodybuilding. And I believe as their coach or person assisting that, you have to take that into considerations. Clen and HGH are safe options. Yes, correct. And I forgot to touch on that. Clen is a great one. Yes, it's in rodent studies, but it shows to have some anti-catabolic effects and muscle preservation effects. So low dose clenbuterol, like 20 micrograms per day, works fantastically. Correct. So just everything that doesn't viralize, touch on that first, do your blood work, and then consider something like an anabolic, like Anabol.
Yeah. And you want to think about it in different cellular pathways. And I know we're getting to a really in-depth discussion. I don't mean to be, but like there's the beta-2 pathway, there's myostatin, there's IGF-1, there's growth hormone, there's insulin, which mediates the JAK-STAT pathway. And then you have other varieties of compounds that do other things too, like actual peptides like GHK copper and other things that can mediate growth in themselves somehow. You have mechanical growth factors, you have like blood growth factors like lactate, things of that nature. And there's so many different features of that spectrum we can attack without ever having to use the androgen pathway. Like, and you can get a lot done with JAK-STAT growth hormone. It's insulin and growth hormone. It's insane. Like, it really is. So yeah, I think Clen working that beta-2 pathway, alpha-2 pathway too, you can utilize, really effective. And then whatever else that's not an androgen you can throw on top of that is pretty much gold standard. So
yeah, like anecdotally speaking, I currently coach and have coached females where it took us, I think, after 3 or 4 years being enhanced, to only then have to use Anabol because we felt we had exhausted, when I say exhausted, we could probably even still use more growth hormone. Okay. But then had pretty much exhausted most of the other, enhancement pathways before having to run anabolics. So really, like, work up to it if needed at all. I also know a couple other coaches who have like females basically either have pro cards or basically knocking on the door who haven't actually used anabolics yet. Now they are pretty goddamn genetically gifted, but okay, it is very feasible. So please, for everyone who thinks that's the first point of call, it's not. It really isn't.
Yeah, 100%. Well, I think that's pretty good for a day. We crossed an hour. That's the main complaint I've received about this little podcast since, is just not going over an hour. So we did it. I got a call here in 10 minutes, so I got to bounce. But guys, I thank you for hopping on this one, asking a ton of beautiful questions. I hope you guys have a beautiful week. It's almost the weekend, so we're getting there, which is super exciting for me and Adam. Fuckers, it's Friday already. You guys are in fucking Loserville on Thursday, idiots. So we're gonna enjoy a Friday and still work. There's literally no difference in our lives from weekends to weekdays. But if you guys have any more questions, leave them in this video on the comments or find us on Instagram. I'm at Kolton_red. And then of course, Adam is at Hyperdrive Hypertrophy. Or you can just search both of our names and you'll find us. And you can DM us questions personally, and we're happy to answer as much as we can, as much as we notice, because sometimes our DMs do get full. And is it fucking Easter already? God damn, it's Easter this weekend. Happy Easter. That either. I didn't even know that, dude. Happy Easter. Fuck, son of a bitch. I did nothing for Easter. Yeah. All right, peeps. I will see y'all later. See us next week. Make sure you're here or be square. Same time, same place. And if you do want to coach, use the link in the description. That'll tell you everything you need to know and book you a call. Let's go.
Take care.